Hey everyone, it's Kate from Blackstone Valley Veggie Gardens. Welcome. It is moving on towards the middle of February, so it's really time to start planting your gardens if you haven't already done so. It's going to be time to start seeds. And I'd like to give you a heads up about 5 crops that have plagued me, for years before I actually figured them out. It's not all that easy to grow a whole boatload of stuff. All these plants have different likes, different dislikes, different life cycles, different growing conditions, etc. So let's talk about some of them. The first one is a delicious, delicious root veggie, and it's a beet. Now, beets are come in white, dark red that we're used to, orange, golden. They come cylindrical, whole bunch of different shapes and sizes. The tops look an awful lot like chard because they're in the same family, but chard doesn't have that round root at the bottom. So beets, although they're round and they're not a long root veggie like a carrot, they actually need some fairly deep soil, soft soil. So the way I give soften the soil is to put a little bit of uh, sand in it. So, or loomy soil as well. And then maybe a little bit, some compost in there to give it some nutrition. It needs some nutrition. But what you don't want to do is over fertilize them. Basically, those fertilizers that you get, the fairly strong ones, the blue ones, the Miracle Grow has out, etc. A lot of those are very high in nitrogen. There's a reason for that. Nitrogen makes things grow up, it makes them grow green, it's wonderful. However, um, we don't want them to really grow up. We want to concentrate on the root, on the bottom. So we don't want to add a lot of nitrogen. You'll confuse the plant. So what we do instead is you may add a little bit of bone meal to the soil. Add some compost. It has enough nitrogen, but add a little bit of bone meal and a little bit of sand to that soil, along with a heaping of compost. Space them out, at least 3 or 4 inches. And if you buy it's just one little seed of beet is actually 5 or 6 seeds all clumped together. So you may have more than one growing in one place. They'll crowd each other out. So if you see more than one growing and it's all clumped up, you're not going to get nice, huge, round beets. So thin them out. If you do so very carefully, you can transplant them right next door. They may take a little while longer. Also, beets are one of those veggies that you can succession plant. So because you get, you pull it out and it's not, uh, you know, you need several of them to keep you in a good supply of beets for the season. So so definitely succession plant them every few weeks. Plant a couple more in another place. They're good companion plants with borage, which is a beautiful, wonderful plant. It's a good companion plant. It brings in it tastes good. You eat the flowers, and it brings in the pollinators as well. Beautiful plant, hardy annual. So, so I think that's about it for beets. Uh, they have to be probably 4 inches apart, and also the soil, make it fairly deep. I think they say 8 inches, but I think it needs to be soft all the way 12 inches down. I wouldn't grow them in a shallow bed. Save your shallow beds for your lettuce and your herbs, but I would definitely grow it in at least 10 to 12 inches. So let's talk about another one, similar growing conditions to the beet, and that's the carrot. So many times we grow carrots, and they end up like, 2 inches tall, wonderfully green on the top, all kinds of leaf coming off of there, but not much in the root department. We don't want carrot leaf. We want a carrot. So same thing, basically what you do is you make sure uh, that you have a little bit of bone meal, a little bit of sand, and a little bit of compost in that soil. And you know, carrot seeds are tiny. They're probably, I don't know, you get a bag of carrot seeds, there's probably 300, 400 seeds in there. They're very, very tiny though. So when you plant them, you need a magnifying glass. I have double cataract, so it's always a challenge to space them appropriately. So typically people kind of like sprinkle them in, and then they grow too thick. And I hate to kill, viable plants, but you really have to thin them out to to at least 2 or 3 inches apart so that they'll have the opportunity to expand a little bit. So you do thin them if you're really, really careful and grab down at the bottom of the green part and just pull ever so slightly, you may be able to get the root intact out in the you can transplant them again, in the same neighborhood with the beets. They get along well. They use basically the same kind of growing conditions. But it's even more important to grow carrot in deep soil, soft, deep soil, because obviously the carrot roots go out in. I don't know whether they're smart or what, but um, if even if you grow in 8 inches, you won't get an 8 inch carrot. So, but if you have the soil, 12 inches, you'll get a longer carrot, and that's what you're looking for. So, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to tell you about carrots. All kinds of carrots, rainbow carrots, nebula carrots, they're purple on the outside, white carrots, yellow carrots, purple carrots, orange carrots. There's some carrots that are round like a beet. Funny, carrots are they're not really in the same family as beets. Beets is in the same family as chard. Believe it or not, carrots are in the same families. I believe I know Queen Anne's lace. They come from basically the same plant, but the carrot's been cultivated, and I think maybe parsley, because you can tell they have a kind of a feathery leaf. So, and again, carrots, the same basic uh, thing as far as companion planting. You know, uh, you grow some carrots. If you wait for them to come out, you pull them out, and then you don't have any carrots left for the next week. If you eat them all, so just keep planting a few carrot seeds. Plant them in between some other crops. The only thing is the carrots and beets, they're not really good companions with your legumes, your peas and beans. They're not really good companions because peas and beans they're fixed nitrogen, and they deposit the nitrogen into the soil. They actually there's a bacteria that actually pulls the nitrogen right from the air and deposits it in the soil. So they're great. Peas and beans are great companions to crops that need nitrogen. However, those are not beets and carrots, because beets and carrots, as you know, they don't need nitrogen because then they'll grow up and they won't grow down. So legumes are not companions to your beets and your carrots. So let's talk about another plant. This is a arch nemesis of mine. We'll talk about the cauliflower. I've successfully grown cauliflower, never as big as you see in the stores. Cauliflower likes a temperature around, I'd say 60 some odd degrees. It's in it's a brassica. It's in the same family as Brussels sprouts, um, cabbage, kale, kohlrabi, and even radish, believe it or not. So it gets all the um, cabbage moth. What happens with all those crops? The mother cabbage moth flies over the brassica plants, and she lays her eggs in them, and the eggs hatch and they begin to uh, eat the cabbage or the Brussels sprouts or whatever, and the uh, and the plant keeps growing over the eggs and over these little tiny insects, but the insects are still alive and they're eating the plant. So then when you go to harvest that nice head of cauliflower, it's all rotten on the inside because there's cabbage worms in there. So with cauliflower and other brassicas, it's best to tent them. It's best to grow them inside of a covering. Typically, I use a garden cloth, garden fabric. It's white. It's more translucent. It's fairly thin. Some water gets in, um, but the bugs don't. So the only thing is, no matter how thin the material, the water is still not, the rain is still not going to permeate. So you do have to open it up and make sure that you water them on occasion. Tent them from start to fruition because you leave them open, for a couple of days. If you have moths, cabbage moth in the area, it'll find them. They overwinter in the soil. They're really tough buggers to get rid of. So another thing is, when you grow your cauliflower, you have to rotate that crop so that, into it, perhaps in a different area in the yard if you have a problem with those cabbage moths. I call them cabbage moths. They go for all brassicas. So, and the other thing is for cauliflowers, you can start it indoors, but you can transplant it. It likes the cool weather, so it's a spring crop. Also, you can start a second crop of cauliflower near the fall. In the winter, it doesn't. I mean, excuse me. In the heat of the summer, it doesn't really grow. It just stays the same size. So you may think it's dying or what have you. It's just waiting for the cooler weather again, and then it will kick in. But while it waits for the cooler weather, it's prone to the insects that love the brassicas. So that's why you have to cover it. It likes cool weather. Start them early and start them late, um, but they won't grow in the summer. So anyway, and cauliflower is good. It's nutritious. You get uh, there's white cauliflower. You can actually blanch those, meaning that you can pull the leaf up over the head so that the head doesn't discolor and grow green leaves inside it. Do a little bit of research on that. How to blanch your white cauliflower. It's not the same as the blanching in cooking. So it's a blanching where in the garden where you bring the leaves up over the whole cauliflower head. In any case, let's talk about celery. Now, I mean, celery from seed is tough. Celery's really easy. You can buy it from the market. You can cut off the bottom and you can transplant the bottom. People typically put it in water until you see the roots. Once you see the roots, you plant it in the garden. So that's like the cut and come again version. However, celery are teeny, teeny, teeny little seeds. And they're not all that viable, actually. They're tough. You can germinate them under your lights inside, and and then they just fizzle out because they're so frail. You want that basically you're doing your seed starting, you want to keep the plants close to the light so they don't bolt and get leggy and die out on you, but they're just very fragile. So I've been known to start them more than once. And when you have a light, any kind of grow light, the ones you buy now are LED. They're much better because they don't get hot and burn out those little fragile little seedlings. So I think you're much better off with those. Um, so anyway, celery, you start that early. I think I'm going to probably start mine. It's February 9th, I think, or February 10th today. I'm going to start my celery seed. And I'll keep it under lights and probably, I don't know, mid-March or beginning of April. I'll transplant it. I'll harden it off, meaning I'll take the seedling, bring it outside for a while, bring it in. The next day I'll bring it out for a longer amount of time and then bring it in. And I will repeat the process each day, elongating the time that I spend outdoors. And then by the end of March, anyway, I'll have those right in the ground and they'll love it. They don't bolt, okay? They don't bolt to seed, and they'll grow all the way into the fall. I grow the giant red celery. It grows 18 inches or higher, nice and fat. They dehydrate well, so you can keep them, forever. Um, you know, dehydrate a whole ton of them. You store them in little baggies or what have you, and then every time you make a stew or make a soup, you just throw them in, and they, cook right back up to normal size. Or you can rehydrate them with a little bit of water. They pop out and put them in your tuna or whatever. It's good stuff. So do, Sally, don't be disturbed when you have a hard time starting the seeds. Just make sure that you keep them watered, start them early, and use some. Anyways, you should, if you're going under lights, you should always get the LED, have the LEDs. It's just much superior experience. So the other one I want to talk about is ground cherries. A ground cherry does not grow in the ground, and it's not a cherry. It's actually a nightshade in the same family as tomatillos, tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, and yes, even potatoes, believe it or not. So ground cherries are lovely. They're little round. Uh, no, they're not. They're not, like I say. They're not cherries. They're not berries, but the little tiny round fruit. Uh, and it comes in its own wrapper, like a tomatillo comes in its own little package. And in theory, when they're ripe, the fruit turns from green to yellow and they fall on the ground. That way you know they're ripe. And you just pick the little package up off the ground and bring them in and eat them. Well, in theory, that's the way it's supposed to happen. It doesn't, though, always. Last year we had a horrible drought and I wasn't there to keep up with the watering, and they all dropped prematurely and they were of no use to me. All it did was drop a bunch of unripened fruit, very bitter. I think it's actually not that you would eat a whole ton of them, but it's actually a little bit on the toxic side if you ate it in great quantities, which you never would because it's bitter, 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 like biting into an aspirin or something. So you wouldn't want it. Uh, so they don't all ripen at the same time, and they're very sensitive to watering. You have to water them consistently, or you'll get some that are ripe, but they don't drop to the ground, and you'll get some that are dropping to the ground and they're green on the inside, and you really can't use them. So, in order to do that, you have to consistently have good, decent, fertile soil, and and you have to make sure you water them consistently so they all ripen basically at the same time. Well, not at the same time. They all ripen when they're supposed to ripen so that you can have a decent supply. Ground cherries are are really quite tasty. They taste like, I'd say, almost like a maybe maybe like a pineapple on the inside. They're quite good. People make jams out of them and jellies, and if they're really ripe, my granddaughter, take them and eat them, just like a regular fruit. So they're very tasty. Just make sure you water them consistently. And again, just like celery, they're tiny seeds. You have to plant them fairly early. And like any nightshade, most of the nightshades, they have fairly long growing season, and uh, they'll take a long time. And in the fall, they'll start to come up for you. So be patient with them. Try them out. They're hard, once they get going, they're an annual plant. Here, they're an annual plant. Uh, but they're hardy self-seeders. So once you get a good crop growing, and some of them are dry, they drop into the ground, they'll grow back again the next year in that same place, whether you want them to or not, unless you have a good coating of mulch over your beds and you know. So those are the crops I wanted to talk to you about. Hopefully, I'm helping you to minimize some issues you'd have. You may have growing beets, carrots, cauliflower, celery, and ground cherries. Thank you very much. Please contact me. Send me an email with any questions. My email is bv, as in boy Victor, bv Veggie Gardens at gmail.com. And my name is Kate. Thank you very much. Happy gardening.